They said it was training. They said it was discipline. But the moment the drill instructor barked, "Finish her off," everyone at Camp Sentinel knew the line had been crossed. 12 fully trained Marines closed in on one woman. Her ribs were cracked. Blood streaked her face. Pain showed in every breath she took. She didn't plead. She didn't retreat. She straightened her spine, planted her feet, and adjusted her stance. What happened next wasn't supposed to be possible. And within minutes, Camp Sentinel would never be the same again. Staff Sergeant Jordan Rivers stepped off the transport as desert heat slammed into her chest like a warning. Camp Sentinel didn't welcome anyone. It tested how much pain a Marine could survive before cracking. Her record spoke for itself. Multiple combat tours, a Bronze Star earned under live fire. But the moment boots hit the sand, none of that mattered, because Jordan was the only woman on base. Whispers followed her across the yard, some curious, most hostile, and watching from the command line stood Sergeant Marcus Blake, a man who wore authority like a weapon. His eyes scanned her once, slow, cold, and dismissed her completely. "She won't last," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. What started as advanced conditioning quickly twisted into something else. Jordan was assigned double drills, longer runs, heavier loads, no recovery time. When others rested, she trained. When she fell, she was ordered back up. Mistakes others made were ignored. Hers were punished. Publicly. Blake's voice became a constant shadow. Sarcastic, cutting, designed to grind her down inch by inch. Each exercise felt less like preparation for combat and more like a test of how much humiliation one Marine could endure. Still, Jordan didn't complain. She taped her blistered hands in silence. She learned to breathe through the pain in her ribs after sparring sessions that somehow always paired her against larger, fresher opponents. At night, alone in her bunk, she stared at the ceiling and reminded herself why she'd come. She hadn't fought her way through war zones to quit here. But Blake wasn't trying to train her. He was trying to erase her. The message became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't about standards. This was about sending a warning. Quit, or be broken. The announcement came just before dusk, when exhaustion had already dulled reflexes and the desert air felt thick with dust and resentment. Sergeant Marcus Blake stood at the center of the yard, hands clasped behind his back, voice calm in a way that made seasoned Marines uneasy. "Tonight," he said, "we begin combat conditioning." A few heads lifted. That phrase meant bruises, broken noses, lessons learned the hard way. But what Blake outlined next made the air itself feel dangerous. No safety gear. A pause. No limits. Another pause, longer this time. No mercy. A murmur rippled through the ranks. This wasn't standard. This wasn't even gray area training. This was something else entirely. Blake's eyes shifted, locked onto Jordan Rivers. "And Staff Sergeant Rivers," he continued, his mouth curling into something close to a smile, "will demonstrate endurance." The yard went silent. Jordan felt it immediately. That cold pressure in her chest, the instinct that had kept her alive in firefights overseas. She knew a trap when she heard one being set. Blake raised his voice. "You'll face 12 Marines. One after another. No breaks. A beat. Alone." Shock spread faster than sound. 12 against 1 wasn't conditioning. It was a sentence. A few Marines exchanged looks. Some stared to the ground. Others glanced toward the command building, silently calculating how far this had crossed the line. Someone whispered, "That's illegal." Another muttered, "He's gone too far." But no one spoke up. Jordan could feel every bruise in her body responding at once. Her ribs throbbed from earlier sparring. Her knuckles were split. Dried blood cracked when she flexed her fingers. She knew the math. Even fully rested, this would be impossible. Blake watched her carefully, waiting for hesitation, waiting for fear, waiting for her to break. Jordan stepped forward. Boots crunching against gravel echoed louder than they should have. She didn't look at Blake. She didn't look at the Marines who would soon be ordered to attack her. She stared straight ahead, jaw set, breathing slow. "Staff Sergeant Rivers," Blake said, almost pleasantly, "you're free to decline." That was the cruelest part. Declining would be recorded as weakness. Refusal would follow her forever, written between the lines of every evaluation, whispered in every recommendation. Blake knew it. Everyone did. Jordan finally turned to face him. "I'm ready," she said. Her voice didn't shake. The Marines were ordered into a loose circle. 12 bodies. 12 trained fighters. Some looked angry. Some uncomfortable. A few looked genuinely sick. These weren't rookies. They knew what this meant. Jordan stepped into the center. For a moment, memory threatened to pull her under. The sound of gunfire from years ago, the heat of explosions, the feeling of being outnumbered in a narrow alley overseas. She forced it down. This wasn't the past. This was now. She rolled her shoulders, ignoring the sharp stab of pain in her ribs. Adjusted her stance slightly. Balanced her weight. Blake's voice cut through the tension. "This isn't personal," he announced to the group. Everyone knew that was a lie. The first Marine lunged fast, eager to end it quickly. For her sake or his own, it was impossible to tell. Jordan moved on instinct, redirecting momentum instead of meeting strength with strength. Pain flared, but training took over. She dropped him hard. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the circle. The second came before she could fully reset. Then the third. Blake didn't stop it. He didn't slow it down. He didn't intervene when elbows landed too close to her ribs or boots clipped her head as she went down and scrambled back up. Minutes stretched. Sweat stung her eyes. Her breathing grew ragged. Somewhere in the chaos, something in her side popped, and white-hot pain nearly stole her vision. Still, she stayed standing. From the edge of the yard, Marines watched with clenched fists. Some wanted to help. Others wanted it over. A few were silently counting, wondering how much a human body could take before it failed. Blake's face remained unreadable. This wasn't about Jordan proving herself. This was about isolation. About showing every Marine watching what happened when someone didn't fit the mold. About teaching silence through example. Jordan felt it then, not just the physical pain, but the weight of every unspoken thought around her. She was alone out there, truly alone, and Blake knew it. Another Marine stepped forward, hesitating this time. Their eyes met briefly. Jordan saw it. The conflict, the apology that couldn't be spoken. She nodded once. "Do it." The circle tightened. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the sand as the trap snapped shut completely. This wasn't training anymore. It wasn't even punishment. It was survival. And as Jordan wiped blood from her mouth and reset her stance again, one truth burned clearer than the pain in her chest. If she went down now, Blake would win. And she had not come this far. To disappear quietly. The first order was sharp and final. Begin. For half a second, nothing happened. 12 Marines stood around Jordan Rivers, their training screaming at them to act, their instincts fighting something deeper. This wasn't a drill anymore. There were no helmets, no pads, no referees, just dust, heat, and a woman already bleeding. Then someone moved. The first Marine came in fast, too fast. He charged like power alone would end it quickly. That was the mistake. Jordan didn't meet him head on. She slid, half a step just enough. His momentum betrayed him. Her elbow snapped upward, clean and brutal, catching his jaw. He went down hard, unconscious before he hit the ground. A stunned silence followed. That wasn't luck. That was skill. The second Marine rushed her immediately, anger flashing across his face. Jordan pivoted, her ribs screaming in protest. She ignored it. A low sweep took his legs. Her knee followed, controlled, precise. He collapsed, gasping, clutching his side. 2 down. The circle widened instinctively. That was when it changed. The Marines stopped seeing her as the woman. They stopped seeing her as already broken. They saw a threat. Jordan's breathing was slow, deliberate. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way she'd learned in combat when chaos threatened to overwhelm the mind. She didn't waste movement, didn't chase. She waited. 3 came at once. She ducked under a swinging fist, used one attacker as a shield, and drove her shoulder into another's chest. Pain flared as a blow glanced off her ribs, but she stayed upright, rolled, struck back. a palm to the throat, a heel to the knee. One Marine screamed as his leg buckled. Another dropped to one knee, wheezing. Gasps erupted from the crowd. No one was mocking now. Jordan's world narrowed to angles and timing. Sand under her boots, the weight of her body, the rhythm of survival. She wasn't fighting to dominate. She was fighting to end each exchange as fast as possible. Efficiency over ego. A Marine tried to grapple her from behind. She felt it instantly, shifted her hips, broke the hold with a brutal twist that sent pain shooting through her own side and his shoulder. He howled as he went down. 5, 6. Blood blurred her vision. She wiped it away with the back of her hand and reset her stance again. Her chest burned. Every breath felt like glass scraping inside her ribs. But she was still standing. Around her, the remaining Marines hesitated. They were trained for war, for enemies who fought back. But this was something else. This was watching a human being refuse to fall when every rule said she should already be done. Their confidence wavered. Jordan saw it. She moved before they could recover it. A feint, a step inside the guard, a sharp strike to the solar plexus. The Marine folded instantly. Another tried to flank her. She turned, swept, and drove him face first into the dirt. 8. The yard was silent except for labored breathing and the soft groans of the fallen. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Jesus." Sergeant Marcus Blake's jaw tightened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had expected her to last maybe 2, 3 at most. Enough to prove his point. Enough to break her in front of everyone. To make the lesson unforgettable. Instead, his Marines were dropping. Jordan staggered as a fresh wave of pain surged through her torso. Something was definitely broken now. She tasted blood again. Her hand shook for a split second. Blake leaned forward. "Finish her," his eyes seemed to say. The remaining Marines exchanged looks. Fear now, mixed with something else, respect. And that terrified them more than anything. Respect made hesitation dangerous. 2 attacked together, coordinated this time. Jordan absorbed a blow to her shoulder, barely keeping her feet. She responded instantly, redirecting one attacker into the other, using gravity and timing like weapons. One went down. The other followed moments later, winded and helpless. 10. A ripple of disbelief ran through the spectators. No one cheered. No one spoke. They just stared. Jordan stood in the center of the circle, swaying now. Her vision tunneled. Her lungs burned. She forced herself to stay upright, to keep her hands up, to keep breathing. 2 left. They moved slower, smarter. They circled, waiting for her to collapse. She didn't. Jordan launched first, pouring everything she had left into speed and surprise. One Marine didn't react in time. She struck, felt the impact travel up her arm, and watched him fall. 11. The last Marine froze. Jordan stopped too. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. They looked at each other, not as enemies, but as Marines who understood exactly what this had become. He lowered his hands slightly, shaking his head in disbelief. Blake's voice cut through the silence like a whip. "Finish her off." The Marine flinched. Jordan straightened, blood dripping from her chin, ribs screaming, body barely holding together. She adjusted her stance one last time. Not defiant, unbreakable. Blake watched from the edge of the yard as something he'd never planned for took shape. His authority, the fear he wielded so easily, was cracking, and everyone could see it. The dust hadn't even settled before Blake raised his hand. "Rotate," he snapped. A ripple of confusion spread through the yard. Fresh Marines stepped forward, uninjured, rested, eyes wide as they took in the scene before them. Bodies on the ground, labored breathing, blood in the sand. And at the center of it all stood Jordan Rivers, swaying on her feet, chest heaving, uniform darkened with sweat and red stains. She shouldn't have been standing. By any medical standard, she should have been on the ground hours ago. Jordan barely registered the change at first. Her world had narrowed to pain and breath. In, out, in, out. Each inhale felt shorter than the last, like her lungs were refusing to fully expand. Something deep in her side shifted wrong when she moved. Crack. The sound was soft, but she felt it. Her body locked for half a second as white-hot pain tore through her ribs. Her vision exploded into stars. She bit down hard, tasting blood, forcing herself not to scream. A rib fractured completely. Someone in the crowd gasped. Blake didn't flinch. "Continue," he ordered. The fresh Marines hesitated. They weren't blind. They could see the way Jordan's arm trembled, the way she favored one side, the way every breath was now a battle she was slowly losing. This wasn't a fair fight. It hadn't been for a long time. Jordan lifted her head anyway. Her legs felt heavy, like they were sinking into the sand. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. She blinked hard, trying to clear the blur creeping in at the edges of her vision. "Quit," her body begged. "Just go down. Just let it end." She remembered a different desert, a different circle of enemies, a radio crackling with static, someone screaming her name over gunfire. She remembered standing when everything inside her said she couldn't. Not then. Not now. The first fresh Marine moved carefully, unsure. Jordan didn't wait. She stepped inside his reach, using what little strength she had left to strike fast and precise. He went down, stunned more than injured. But the cost was immediate. Her body screamed in protest. Her knees buckled. She caught herself just in time, one hand brushing the sand as she forced herself back upright. The second Marine came in harder. Jordan tried to pivot and nearly collapsed. A blow landed square against her fractured ribs. Something tore. She cried out despite herself. The sound ripped from her chest before she could stop it. The Marine froze in horror, realizing what he'd done. Jordan dropped to one knee. The yard erupted in noise, shouts, protests, disbelief. Someone yelled for a medic. Someone else shouted Blake's name. Blake raised his voice over them all. "Get up," he barked. Jordan stayed where she was for a moment, head bowed, blood dripping onto the sand beneath her. Then she pushed herself up, slowly, deliberately, using her thighs, her core, her will, anything except her broken side. When she stood again, the reaction was immediate. Silence. Not the tense silence of fear, but something heavier, something reverent. Marines who had mocked her days earlier now stared openly, eyes wide, throats tight. She was beyond pain now, beyond pride, beyond fear. She was operating on something deeper. The next exchange barely registered as a fight. Jordan deflected, redirected, ended it quickly, not with force but with timing. She couldn't afford another direct hit. Her vision tunneled further. Faces blurred. The world tilted dangerously. She swayed. This time, she didn't catch herself. Jordan fell flat onto her back, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. She lay there, staring up at the darkening sky, chest fluttering uselessly. It would be so easy to stay down. No one would blame her now. She'd already done the impossible. Blake took a step forward. "That's enough," he said, not with mercy, but irritation. A medic rushed in from the edge of the yard, kneeling beside her. "She's done," he said urgently. "She's seriously injured." Jordan turned her head slowly. "No," she whispered. The medic froze. She pushed herself up onto one elbow, then another, ignoring the way the world spun violently around her. Blake frowned. "Stand down, Rivers. Training is concluded." Jordan laughed. It came out rough and broken, more breath than sound. Training. She dragged herself to her feet, every movement deliberate, controlled. Blood ran freely now, her body no longer able to contain the damage. She faced Blake. For the first time since arriving at Camp Sentinel, she really looked at him, not as a superior, not as an authority, but as a man hiding behind power. "This isn't training," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but clear. The yard went silent. Blake's eyes flashed. "Watch your tone. This isn't discipline," Jordan continued, louder now. "This is abuse." The word hit like a shockwave. No one breathed. Jordan took a step closer, then another. Each one hurt. Each one mattered. "You set me up," she said. "You isolated me. You pushed past regulation, past legality, past humanity." Blake opened his mouth. She didn't let him speak. "You wanted me broken," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Not because I failed, not because I wasn't capable." She met his eyes. "But because I didn't fit." Blake's face hardened. You're finished here. Jordan nodded slowly. Maybe, she said, but so are you. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Blake glanced around, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Because the Marines weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her, not as a problem, not as a liability, but as a Marine who had endured what no one else would have survived. Jordan took one last breath, shallow and painful. You can punish me, she said quietly. You can bury this. She gestured weakly to the fallen Marines, to the sand soaked with blood. But everyone here saw it. The silence stretched, thick and unbreakable. Blake said nothing. Jordan's legs finally gave out. As she collapsed, hands reached out, not to restrain her, but to catch her. And as medics rushed in and Marines closed ranks around her, one truth settled over Camp Sentinel like a verdict. Her ribs were broken. Her body was battered. But her will had never been stronger. Blake should have stopped. Anyone with sense would have. Jordan Rivers was barely upright, supported more by will than muscle. Medics hovered close. Marines stood tense, uncertain, watching something irreversible take shape. Blake looked at her and made his final mistake. Finish her off, he said. The words landed wrong this time. Not like an order, like a confession. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then all 12 came at once. Not in mockery, not in cruelty, but because the command had been given, and Marines are trained to obey. Jordan didn't think. She couldn't. Thinking belonged to a body that still had strength. What took over now was something older, deeper, built from every scar she carried, every lesson learned the hard way, every moment she had refused to quit when quitting would have been easier. She moved, not fast, not flashy, right? She shifted just enough to avoid the first rush, letting momentum work for her. One Marine collided with another. She struck where armor didn't exist. A nerve, a joint, a balance point. One went down, then another. The rest hesitated just long enough. Jordan pressed the advantage. Every movement was economy. No wasted force. No anger. Just purpose. She used the ground, the angles, the training Blake himself had tried to twist into a weapon against her. A Marine grabbed her arm. She rolled through the pain and dropped him hard. Another swung wildly. Fear had replaced discipline now. She stepped inside the strike and ended it. The yard erupted into chaos. Shouts. Orders. Someone yelling to stop. But Blake didn't. He stood frozen, watching control slip through his fingers like sand. Jordan's ribs screamed. Her vision flickered in and out. At one point, her knee buckled, and she caught herself using a fallen Marine's shoulder to stay upright. She refused to go down. One by one, they fell, not destroyed, not humiliated, but stopped. When the last Marine dropped to one knee, unable to continue, the yard went dead quiet. Jordan stood alone, barely, blood-soaked, shaking, breathing shallow and ragged, but standing. The sun had fully set now, leaving only floodlights and disbelief. Blake finally spoke. His voice sounded small. Stand down. No one listened, not because they were defiant, but because the authority behind his words was gone. Medics rushed forward. Witnesses began speaking, quietly at first, then louder. Names, times, orders repeated out loud, as if saying them made them real. Jordan swayed. This time, she didn't fight it. She let herself be caught. As they laid her on the stretcher, her eyes never left Blake. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He said nothing at all. In the days that followed, Camp Sentinel changed. Statements were taken. Logs reviewed. Videos surfaced. Investigations began. Not rushed, not dramatic, but relentless. Blake's name stopped appearing on schedules. His office door stayed closed. Then empty. His career didn't end with handcuffs or headlines. It ended the way power always does when the truth finally arrives. With silence. Jordan Rivers woke up in a hospital weeks later, ribs wrapped, body battered, future uncertain. But when Marines visited her room, quiet, respectful, standing a little straighter, she understood something important. Legends aren't made by winning fights. They're made by refusing to disappear. When someone tries to erase you. And at Camp Sentinel, long after Blake's name faded, One truth remained unchallenged. They tried to finish her off. They failed. Jordan Rivers didn't win because she was the strongest in the yard. She won because she refused to be erased. That day wasn't about combat. It was about standing your ground when the system tells you to vanish, when every rule, every expectation, and every voice says you don't belong. They told her to quit. They told her to know her place. Instead, she changed the rules. And sometimes, the bravest fight isn't against the enemy in front of you. It's against the people who insist you have no right to exist at all. Jordan stood, and in standing, she became unforgettable.